Welcome to the fifth episode of Test of Times. And today, this is a very special episode for all of us because we reminisce India's first Test victory. India's first Test victory came in 1952 after playing 20 years of cricket and 25 Test matches against England at Madras. And today, we have a very special guest in Arunabha Sengupta who is here to discuss the first test victory. Let me take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Sengupta. Mr. Sengupta is a cricket historian, is a writer, and he's someone who was born and brought up in India. He has lived all across the globe, be it US, Switzerland, and is currently staying in Amsterdam. He has written a lot of books on cricket, recent one being upon Sachin and Azhar at Cape Town alongside Mr. Abhishek Mukherjee. He also wrote a brilliant book named Apartheid, which is basically based on the South African cricket history. I welcome him on the show and I hope everything is fine in Amsterdam.
Yeah, everything is fine here. About Qatar.
Yes, it's very good, sir. Thank you very much for asking. So, let's talk about this first test win. India have played around 89 years of cricket, debuting in 1932 on the 25th of June, definitely at England. They played England at Lord's. What do you think, was the importance of this test victory? Because was it the kickstart of all the good things happening in Indian cricket?
Yeah, it's definitely the first test win puts you under that win column. It doesn't seem blank anymore. And it
Yes.
had come a long time in coming. So India played for 20 years, as you already mentioned. But we must remember that 20 years doesn't mean that many test matches. They played just 25 test matches, and there was a 6 year gap because of the war.
Correct, yes, sir.
Um, Alongside, there is also the factor to be considered that they had played only England and West Indies at home and
Yes.
Australia away.
Yes.
So the test win, the first test win might have come earlier as well. If India, say, when Lala Amarnath's team toured Australia in 47-48,
Yes.
if they had actually gone across the Tasman Sea and played against New Zealand,
Correct.
because
Yes.
New Zealand at that time was a pretty weak side and everybody was actually routing them. So India eventually toured New Zealand in 67-68 under Pataudi, and that was their first overseas series win. But I have a suspicion that if India had gone in 47-48, they would have won there. Um, at least one test match, if not a series.
Correct.
Apart
Yes.
from that, obviously South Africa never played against India till because of the apartheid situation. But even when we look at South Africa, they were not really a strong side in the 30s and 40s. They were quite like the New Zealand and South Africa had been the minnows for a long time.
Yes.
1950s, the South Africa became a strong side, and in the 60s they were a very very powerful side. But if India had played against them, I think we cannot say that's all conjecture, but they had been playing against England and Australia in Australia. John Bradman's team, easy proposition, and against West Indies, who were also quite a powerful side. Now, against West Indies in the first played 48-49, they almost pulled off a win.
Yes.
They almost pulled off a win in Bombay, and they were asked to score 361 in the final innings. And Hazare and Modi, Rusi
Oh,
Modi and Vijay
proceed.
Hazare, they had a good partnership. They almost overhauled the total. They lost wickets, but they still kept on going for the runs. Datu Fadkar and all of them. And and there were 6 runs to go, 1 over and 1 ball to go, and 1 wicket in hand.
Yes.
And it would have gone. It could, but the umpire miscounted, and he
Yes.
also misread the time and declared the
Wow.
match finished. So that's another time that they came. So this was a long time in coming. Yes, the kick started. I wouldn't say it kick started really, but India started winning after that. And
Yes.
after that, they played Pakistan, who was a new entrant,
Yes.
and then New Zealand. So they started winning the matches, although their record was nothing to be 50s.
Yes. Now, this tour was actually not in place, as you told me while we were discussing about this topic. This was not in place in 1952. So, what actually happened, and why did England actually tour India in 1952, 1951, and 1952?
So if you see 1951-52 MCC toured India, and immediately after that India toured England. So
Correct.
back-to-back series, which was quite extraordinary. So what happened was this was the first time, in fact, not a lot of people talk about this. This was the first time that England played a side named India. So they
Yes.
had played against us in 1932, 33, 34, 36, 46,
Correct.
but called All India because it was British India plus all the princely states.
Yes. Yes.
So only after independence, the prince were brought under Indian jurisdiction
Hmm.
uh, because of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel mainly,
Yes.
and it became an united India.
Correct.
And this was the first time the English were playing India. And again, what happened was the India was the colony which was the jewel in the crown,
Hmm.
and 47 had seen the independence of India. After that, there was a doubt whether India would continue in the Commonwealth.
Correct. Yes.
Uh, there was a lot of discussion whether India would continue in the Commonwealth. Nehru, the prime minister, he was in favor of that, and that was because of the geopolitical situation. A lot of his cabinet members were not really in favor. And the British, they had given India, that was one of the biggest colonies and the biggest colony, and it was a jewel in the crown. And even in 1900, Lord Curzon, who was the viceroy,
Hmm.
said that if we lose India, we become a third class power.
Correct. Yes.
So they were insistent that India remain in the Commonwealth, although it was known for non-white nations to be in sitting side by side with the other Commonwealth members. So there was this uncertainty, and at that time there was no tour planned, and actually uh, ICC was called Imperial Cricket Conference at that
Yes.
time.
Correct.
Imperial because it's
Hmm.
so all to do with the empire. And according to the rules of ICC, if a country doesn't belong to the Commonwealth,
Hmm.
that country loses the official or the full member status.
Okay.
So in 1948, when the ICC conference took place,
Hmm.
India was made a provisional member. They were not the full member again because they were not
Okay.
certain that they
Okay.
would remain in the Commonwealth. And if India hadn't gone into the Commonwealth or hadn't decided to stay in the Commonwealth, they would have been relegated to a non-full member and they would have lost test status totally.
Yes.
Yeah. And in 1949, actually, the Commonwealth prime ministers met in London, and there were a lot of provisions made, and Jawaharlal Nehru was convinced that India could remain in the Commonwealth. There were a lot of propositions given that even if you are becoming a republic in 1950,
Hmm.
you can still remain a republic, and the King of England could become the president of India. All
Correct.
those sort of
Yes. Hmm.
like way outs were given to him, but that didn't take place, thankfully. But India remained in the Commonwealth, and the moment they remained in the Commonwealth, they were again promoted to a full member status. And the moment this happened, if you see 1948-49, no test playing nation toured India. It was a Commonwealth side
Correct.
which toured India, like a hodgepodge of different test
Yes.
cricketers.
Hmm.
In 50-51, also a Commonwealth side toured India. And they were quite good players like Frank Worrell, Jim Laker, all these people toured.
Yes.
But when this was decided that India would remain in the Commonwealth, that was a big thing for the British, and the diplomatic value of it was such that MCC was immediately asked that you plan tours to India, not only tour India, but also you arrange a for India to tour England in
Yes.
52, and
Yes.
that
Okay.
was very significant because Don Bradman's Australians had come in 1948, and Lindsay Hassett's Australians were supposed to come in 1952.
Okay.
And because of India's inclusion in Commonwealth, and because Indian tour was arranged, Ashes, which is still considered the holy grail of cricket by the English,
Yes.
Ashes was pushed back by a year
Okay.
to accommodate the Indians, which was pretty significant.
No, that 1952 tour was significant in
So
many ways. Yes, it was significant in many ways also. Now, talking about the Test series, do you think how would you rate the overall performance of the Indian team? Because in the first three tests, be it at Calcutta, be it at Delhi, and be it at Bombay, India played very well. India fared well, but in Kanpur, the fourth test we lost. Do you think there was a strategy also involved, and there was proper thinking towards the game that yeah, we can go and we can win the test series, or it was like just okay, let's enjoy our cricket?
more than enjoying cricket, it was more of a very defensive mindset with which India went into the test matches. In Delhi, they should have won.
Yes.
The English batsmen, and England was actually a very weak team
Hmm.
because none of the professional cricketers and none of the big cricketers came here, like Hutton, Washbrook, Compton,
Yes. Nobody.
uh, none of Bedser, none of
Yes.
them traveled, Evans. So it was a very second string side that was sent.
Hmm.
And Nigel Howard, who was the captain of the team,
Yes.
he was an amateur cricketer who had never played Test cricket. The vice captain, Donald Carr, who led in the final Test, he also was a debutant. He never played Test cricket before this. And they were not really the best cricketers. There was some talent like Tom Graveney,
Yes.
and there was Lawson, who was Hutton's opening partner in Yorkshire. There was Tattersall, but there was not really, like, it was not even the second string side. I would call it third string side. So India found themselves in quite unusual situation of dominating the first test. They were really all at sea against the spin, and they were all out for 200 odd, very low score. And then India batted, tried to consolidate, and the second day they scored less than 200 runs. They lost just one wicket, but they scored less than 200 runs.
Yes.
The third day, Merchant and Hazare had that huge partnership.
Hmm.
Hazare had already created the Indian record of uh, highest score. That
Hmm.
was about 145 in
Correct.
Australia. So
Yes.
Merchant went past it,
Hmm.
and then Hazare went past it in the same innings. They were
Yes.
intent on beating each other's records.
Hmm. True.
So by the time they took a considerable lead and broke and declared,
Hmm.
there was not enough time left in the match to really finish the match, to put England under a lot of
Under.
pressure. So that was like they were situated in thinking in terms of going for a win.
Hmm.
I would say that, and someone like Brian Statham, a very young Brian Statham, had uh, come to tour with the English side. And he, in his autobiography later on, he said that it was really confusing because these very great players, they were like in such a strong position, but they didn't go for the runs. It seemed that they didn't want to win.
Yes.
So the Delhi test was still lost. They could have won the test and thereby the series as well. But yes, the second and third didn't really. Neither of the teams really made an effort to play very positive cricket. It was always safety first.
Yes.
For could be understood that they were a bunch of very junior cricketers, but the Indians also seemed to lack a lot of confidence in themselves.
Correct.
Didn't really didn't really go for the win. And the fourth test, yes, they misread the wicket. They went in with two leg spinners. As the off spinner Tattersall, he actually made all the difference, and they lost that test. Ultimately, everything came to an end. And even when they won the fifth test, during the fifth test, King George, he passed away.
Yes.
So
Yes.
came, came along that the king had passed away, and Colonel Wright Carr, who was the president of MCC, he English cricketers from London, saying that the king has passed away, so it will be better if you don't play the following day. And that
Okay.
was the that came through from MCC during the entire tour. So they were
Yes.
not really giving it a lot of importance.
Okay.
So they played with, and they were quite surprised to see, the English cricketers were quite surprised to see that even after the victory, the first test win, the celebrations were quite mean. And some of them even said that, I know you have lost because you are mourning your king,
Hmm.
you
Wow.
know. So the, they won, but I think the idea didn't sink home till then that they could have won and they had really won a test match. But global context, it was a win. Definitely, it put India on the way in Test cricket. But if you think of it, a very significant one, other than being the first ever Test victory, it came against a pretty weak side, and that also they drew. So um, actually, when they lost in Kanpur,
Yes.
so there when the teams were going to Kanpur, had heard that there could be some student demonstration against the British,
Okay.
the
Yes.
anti-British demonstrations.
Hmm.
Ended. The students were so frustrated with the Indian performance
Hmm.
that they started throwing stones at the Indian tour bus,
Wow.
team bus.
Hmm.
And
This is typical.
Divecha, who was the 12th man, he
This
had
is
been in.
this is
Yeah,
a typical. This is a typical Indian behavior. The Indians don't do well. We start pelting stones at them. This is a typical Indian behavior.
yeah, absolutely. It's kind of it's and that has been throughout history. Like I've grown up in Calcutta, and I've seen uh, players, bottles being pelted at players for every possible reason.
Yes.
But there was Divecha, the 12th man of this Kanpur, had played in England, and he knew the English players, and he had come knocking on their bus that our bus is being stoned, so can I take a ride in your bus? So
Wow.
situation.
So as you mentioned about not a strong English team being sent to India. Why did the English team sent a very weak second or third string side to India, and it actually went on till 1977 if I'm not wrong. What do you think was the main reason behind it?
Yeah. So 76, 77 was the first time that they sent a full strength side.
Hmm.
So the Tony Greig's side was the first full strength English side to come to India. Um, so if you look at the tours that took place before that, 52, 33, 34, this did send a strong side, although without the fast bowlers like Ladut and Vos after the Bodyline series. But from in the post-independent days, they were pretty weak sides. 61, 62, none of the top stars came, and a very junior Ted Dexter was asked to lead. 64, 65, sorry, 63, 64 again. Smith led a side without many of their star players. And most surprisingly, even after India beat England in 1971,
Yes.
the team sent after that, 72, 73, that was again led by a debutant like
Okay.
Nigel Howard. It was Tony Lewis.
Tony Lewis. Yes.
So they, yeah. So they did not really get a lot of seasoned cricketers to agree to come to India.
Okay.
So Ted Dexter, when he came as a second or third choice. Uh, May had retired, Cowdrey didn't want to go, and all these things happened. And Dexter, when he was asked whether he would like to take another side 2 years later, he said no. That tour was quite troublesome one. I don't want to take another. So even if you look at the experience of the English cricketers in during this tour, 51, 52 tour, you can make out that there was a lot of culture shock.
All right.
So on one side, they were entertained by people like the Maharaja of Patiala, who lavishly entertained them, took them on hunts, shoots, uh, like really gave them first class treatment. But on the other side, before the globalization actually opened up the Indian economy, and now the foreign teams really want to come to India because
Yes.
the kind of hotels they are kept in, they don't get it anywhere else in the world. But during those times, the hotels were not really standard ones.
Mhm.
During this tour of Nigel Howard's team, there were monkeys running into the room.
Oh,
There were lizards.
oh my God.
Um, there were occasions when they went out on the Ganges, like boating in the Ganges, and they saw a dead body trailing them,
Ah,
and so it was quite a culture shock for them. Although at the same time, there were several instances when these long journeys within India,
hmm,
it's a hot country, humid, and long journeys can be quite intolerably frustrating. The touring cricketers were uh, given first class accommodation in trains.
correct. Hmm.
They were sent first class. Some of the English amateur cricketers were also given flight tickets, while the
Wow.
Indian team almost always had to travel second class. You know,
Hmm.
but even this distinction, this difference, did not really help them along. And there were other problems as well. There was always the problem of stomach bugs.
Ah,
So in 63, 64, once there were so many people in the hospital that Henry Blofeld, who was covering the match, who was covering the series, was asked to be on standby.
yes,
We
yes.
almost played a test.
Hmm.
So these happened quite often. And apart from that, there was always the fear that we'll be catching these stomach bugs and we will be taken. Even in 97, 98, Shane Warne, he
Yes.
had baked beans posted, you know,
Hmm.
or like couriered across so that he could get by. So this was always a kind of a problem that they faced. And alongside, there was also another problem which might not have been voiced that much, but it was written in most of the biographies, autobiographies later on, that some parts of India, like Bombay, it was a
Hmm.
dry state, you
Ah,
know,
okay.
and getting a beer after the game was
Was
really, really difficult.
hmm,
So a lot of them did not want to go through that experience.
correct.
So all these played a role, and India was not really a nice experience. So they even during the Commonwealth tours, there was some poetry written that send your like all the administrators, but for heaven's sake, don't send me.
Wow.
So
Yes. No, you made a very interesting point about the bugs. Whenever we go to India, there is a little bit of, scared. Even we are a little scared that we might be hit by the stomach bugs, and that is a very bad thing. Now we talk about the heroes of that fifth test. There was a Vinu Mankad who took 12 wickets in that test. Actually, was one of the pioneers of Indian cricket. We talk about Pankaj Roy and Polly Umrigar. Those first innings hundreds, which actually helped India to score more than 450 and put pressure on this English team in order to get a innings victory. And also, I would want to know one more thing is that Vijay Hazare was the captain for that series, and do you think that Lala Amarnath was also there, but he wasn't captain for that series? Do you think Lala Amarnath showed proper support to Vijay Hazare?
well, this particular series, it had a lot of like future Indian batsmen
Correct. Yes.
to the fore. So you mentioned Polly Umbriger and Pankaj Roy. They were all knocking at the on the doors of Test cricket, and they had come into the Indian team. And this was the series which really established them as batsmen who would carry the Indian side for a long time because at that point they had already done their bit. They were still good batsmen, but Merchant actually played his last test. The
Yeah.
first test of the series was Merchant's last test.
Last. Yes.
Hazare would go on for some time, but even then he was also approaching the end of his career. So Paulie Umriger, great batsman of great in the relative sense, of course, in the Indian sense, he was the next great name who would carry the burden of batsmanship
Yeah.
next decade or so, and with excellent results. He would end up with the highest number of runs and highest number of centuries when he would retire. And Pankaj Roy also was one of the mainstays of the side, and he got 2 centuries in the series. Apart from that, Mankad, he was already one of the greatest all-rounders of the world,
Correct.
alongside Keith Miller
Hmm.
and perhaps Trevor Bailey. He
Yes.
was right up there. And if these people, Hazare, Merchant, and Mankad, had not lost so many years due to the Second World War, they would have much better records. So this was also one of Mankad's stupendous successes.
Yes.
Um, After this, he did not actually go to England with the Indian team. He was
Hmm.
playing in the Lancashire League, and he was
Yeah.
drafted into the side after the disaster at Headingley. And this series at Lords has gone down as Mankad's test. He's 70 and 184 not out and 5 wickets.
5 wickets.
So
Yes.
this was the peak of Mankad. And later on, he formed that opening partnership with Pankaj Roy with the hitting two double hundreds against England, and Pankaj and Roy had that 413 runs opening
13 runs.
partnership,
Yes.
which stood as a world record for a long time. So all this was happening, and also alongside Ghulam Ahmed had come in, the off
Yes.
spinner. Ghulam Ahmed and Mankad, they formed a combination of spin, and soon after that, during the uh, later tour of the West Indies, in immediately after the England series, touring West Indies, Shuas Gupte would also come in. So Gupte, Ghulam Ahmed, and Mankad, they would form the first spin trio,
Yes.
in Indian cricket, and there have been so many after that, but they were a high class one. And Gupte still stands as one of the best
And the
spinners
spinners.
ever produced. So this was all happening, and this next generation of Indian cricketers were being like grounded in or finding their feet in this series. Um, as far as Lala Amarnath is concerned, a stupendous cricketer when he came in, and he debuted for India in the 33-34 test in the CCI ground. But then it was a very controversial cricket career. So
Yes.
he was sent back from the 36 tour by Vizzy,
Yes.
and that was a lot of fiasco there. And later on, when Vizzy actually became a selector,
Hmm.
he was somehow instrumental in making him captain as well. So he went to Australia as the Indian captain, and he was like he continued as the captain, and then he fell out with the management. There was a lot of like controversies, and there were some allegations that he had taken bribes to include a cricketer in the side, and there were a lot of allegations that took place, and Amarnath actually answered all the allegations, but he was sidelined. He was dropped from the series, dropped from the test side. And this 51-52 series was actually when he was brought back into the side as a kind of olive branch given, like as a kind of ceasefire between him and the selectors. So he was obviously not in his prime anymore. He was far towards the end of his days. But he did play 3 of the test matches
Correct. Yes.
under Hazare, and he did not quite he did not really produce so much of a great performance or anything, but he did play a role. Like he did, he was there, and Lala Amarnath's presence in the team list that really was something added weight to the entire 11. So he did play. It is always a bit controversial to say whether he showed his full support or not. Whether Hazare consulted him as captain or not, it's a bit difficult to say, especially after all these years and with all
Correct.
these legends that have grown up around cricket. But he was a larger than life character, and him in the side meant something. Apart from that, this 52 win in Madras, this was also the final test of Mustaq Ali. There was
Yes.
another great name in Indian
Great
cricket.
name. Yes.
In the and he also he also didn't play much of a crucial role, but he did perform. He scored around 22 runs in the innings that India batted, and so I would say this was kind of a handover. Like Mushtaq Ali, Lala
Mm.
Manat was coming to the end of his career. Merchant retired after the first test; he
First
never
test.
played again,
Mm.
and Hazare was still like carrying the side along. And the new generation was coming in, like Roy, Umrigar, this Gupte would come in after some time, Ghulam Ahmed. So this was kind of a transition stage, but they did a good job of transition as long as they didn't have to play in hostile foreign surfaces like England with Freddie Truman bowling at them, of course.
Yes. So, we have had a brilliant chat about, the first test win. My final question to you, you know, do you think, keeping everything aside, do you think the first test victory was very significant in one fact that, it came against a team like England who had ruled over you for 2 centuries? And, maybe the common man who doesn't understand cricket that much would be like, wow, we have defeated England. Was that the feeling with a common Indian?
Um, to an extent, yes, but I'd say like I'd say that particular feeling of beating England, that was more significant when India beat England in 1971 in England, and that was
Correct.
more significant because that was the first generation which had grown after the independence,
Yes.
and for them,
Hmm.
that was like striking away the shackles of uh, a long history of servile attitude, and that had come at a particular stage when India was still like not a lot of people believed that India would survive. India was having this. They were going on war with Pakistan regarding the East Pakistan or Bangladesh issue. So a lot of factors played in that, and so if you think about it, there was um, even when India toured England in 1952, or the British still considered the Commonwealth as their like something that they had contributed to, something they were still not really responsible, but they were responsible for the success. They still gave themselves a lot of credit for creating this democracy in India, which is very very doubtful, debatable whether it in that or not. They created a lot of fiasco by drawing those lines and going through
Yes.
the partition, but they gave themselves a lot of credit. So the 1952 tour, when India went to England, they were splashed in the press, like yeah, they were welcoming back India and England. The aftermath of that British rule was still there. But when you talk about 1971, that had away when India played the first match against Middlesex in
Yes.
1971, the tour opener. There
Yes.
was no mention that such a match in the papers. So they were not taken seriously at all. Uh, After independence, India had played 3 tests against England, um, and in 1952, 59, and 67, and they had lost all the tests except for one at the end of, and there also they had conceded a 220-run first innings lead. So Indians were not really expected to do well in England. They were supposed to be pushovers. They were not expected to do well in the cricketing sense and in also the geopolitical sense.
Yes.
That was a more significant one, that India won in England in 71. That was a real It created a lot of pride and also other sort of prestige for India. But in 1951-52, yes, India did win, and it was not that people did not expect them to win because people could see that this side was not really that great. But of course, yes, to some extent, it was a victory against the English, and this was not really something that was they were used to. But we have to remember at the same time that there had been a lot of unofficial test matches.
Correct. Yes.
So in 37-38, Lord Tennyson's side was a good side who had played a number of unofficial test matches, and India had actually won some of them. So and Mankad had performed really badly.
Yes.
And even before that, Jack Ryder's Australian side had come with a lot of over the hill old Australian cricketers, and again uh, bankrolled these tours. And India did win those matches. So the way we look at Test cricket now, whether it these games had Test status and whether this there was Test success, at that time the Indian people were um not so used to this concepts of this is a test match, this is an unofficial test match, this is an official test match. Those who were really into cricket understood that. But for the general people, a win against Lord Tennyson's side and a win
Yes.
against this Nigel Howard side, they were more or less comparable. I wouldn't say that was that significant. Yes, down the line it is significant because it is a first test win. But at that time, I don't think that they made a huge hue and cry about that.
So it was a pleasure having you on the show. We discussed about the first test win of India, a great victory for India, kickstarting a great amount of things happening in Indian cricket and where Indian cricket is today. Any final remarks from your side?
Um, I'll tell you an anecdote about the tour.
Yes, definitely.
There was Don Brennan, who was the there's Don Brennan, who was the reserve wicketkeeper, and he did not play even a single test. But he was a very talented wicketkeeper, but he didn't get to play a single test match. But he claimed that he was one of the most successful cricketers in the tour, and the reason was when in Hyderabad, the cricketers visited the Nizam,
Yes.
Nizam of Hyderabad.
Hmm.
He had like he had seceded to the Indian nation, like he was part of the Indian government now. Like the Hyderabad was
Yes.
part of the Indian nation now, but he had been an independent ruler, and he was kind of one of the richest people of the
Correct.
world. And they were entertained lavishly, and they were taken on hunts. And this English cricket team actually called this Nizam his exalted highness. They actually called him his exhausted highness because he
Wow.
had about 100 wives or so. Yeah, so they called
Oh
him
my
his
God.
exhausted highness. But anyway, when they went on this hunting expedition, this Don Brennan, he bagged a panther with his first shot, and he
Okay.
said that my tour is successful.
Wow. Yes.
So my tour is already successful. No one can like replicate my success. I bagged a panther with my first shot. So yeah, that was what tours to India was all about. On one side, they saw filth, a lot of squalor, a lot of poverty, poor ramshackle hotels in which they had to stay, long journeys in the heat and dust. But on the other side, there was lavish entertainment, hunts, expeditions, getting first class treatment by the rulers, like the princes, who were still very wealthy people. So that was all these tours were all about.
So, thank you very much for the anecdote. It was seriously a very interesting and intriguing one. It was a brilliant talk having with you about this first test win. Thank you for being on the show. And please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And just tell in the comment section
Definitely.
what you liked most about this episode. Thank you very much. Be safe and be happy. Thank you.